There's a moment that happens in almost every job, almost every week, and how you handle it says more about you than almost anything else. It's not how you perform when things are going well, it's what you do in the first 5 seconds after someone tells you you've gotten something wrong. In this series, we've talked about hiding behind email instead of having the conversation, and the scripts for starting the conversation you've been avoiding. This time, we're looking at the other side. What happens when someone starts that conversation with you? When someone raises an issue with us, most people do one of three things. So picture this. Someone tells you there were a few problems with the deck you put together for a client. The defensive reaction sounds like this. Well, I did flag that. I was short on time, and to be fair, some of that came from someone else's section. The shutdown reaction looks something like nodding, saying okay, noted, and going quiet for the rest of the day, maybe following that evening by a long email explaining everything that went wrong and why it wasn't really your fault. The collapse reaction sounds like this. I'm so sorry, I clearly can't be trusted with this. I'll redo the whole thing tonight. All three feel like a response in the moment. None of them actually deal with what's been raised. Now, I want to be clear here. Feedback doesn't feel good. Nobody enjoys being told they've gotten something wrong. But here's what actually happens over time. The people who can sit with feedback without flinching, without justifying, and without collapsing are the people others trust with more. Not because they're tougher, because they're easier to work with. Because here's the truth. Feedback isn't a verdict on who you are, it's information about what happened. And the moment you start treating it as information instead of an attack, everything about how you respond changes. So let's start with the moment itself. Someone's just told you something didn't land well, or that you've gotten something wrong. What you say in the first 5 seconds sets the tone for everything that follows. So don't say, well, that's not really fair because. That's the defensive reflex, and here's what it does. It tells the other person you're not actually listening, you're just waiting for your turn to talk. So instead say, okay, let me think about that for a second. That's it, a short pause, an acknowledgement, nothing more. This one sentence buys you something valuable, a moment to actually hear what's been said, instead of reacting to it before it's even landed. Here's something worth knowing. Sometimes feedback is delivered badly. Too blunt, too harsh, maybe even unfair in how it's framed. Picture someone saying, honestly, that just wasn't good enough. No explanation, no softening, just that. When that happens, it's tempting to dismiss the whole thing because of how it was said. But here's the shift. The way feedback is delivered and whether there's something useful inside it are two completely different things. You can think that landed harder than it needed to, and there might still be something here worth looking at. You don't have to decide in the moment whether the delivery was fair, you just have to stay open to whether the content is useful. The delivery is a separate conversation for another time if it matters. Here's where most people go wrong. They treat feedback like a final verdict, something to accept or reject on the spot. Instead, treat it as the opening of a conversation. Don't stay silent after hearing something vague like you're not really stepping up in meetings, while quietly deciding the other person is wrong about you. Instead say, can you give me an example of when you noticed that? I want to make sure I understand what you're seeing. This does two things. It turns a vague, hard to act on comment into something specific, and it shows the other person you're actually engaging, not just absorbing it and moving on. Most of the time, this single question changes the entire tone of the conversation. Now, sometimes you genuinely disagree with the feedback, and that's allowed. But here's the trap. If you disagree too quickly, it looks like you weren't listening, even if you have a fair point. So don't say, I don't agree with that at all. Instead say, I see it a bit differently. Can I share how it looked from my side? And we can figure out where the gap is. Notice what that does? It doesn't reject the other person's view. It places your view alongside theirs and turns it into something you're figuring out together. Now that's a completely different posture, and it almost always gets a better response than an outright no. Sometimes in the moment you genuinely don't know what to say. Maybe you're caught off guard. Maybe you need to think about it properly before responding. Now that's fine also. But here's where people go wrong with this one too. They go quiet in the moment and then hours later send a long email laying out everything they wish they'd said. Carefully worded, slightly defensive, and often making things worse, not better. So don't be silent, then send a 3-paragraph email that evening. Instead say, in the moment, I want to give this a proper think rather than respond straight away. Can we grab 10 minutes tomorrow? This tells the other person you're taking it seriously without forcing you to react before you're ready. And when you do follow up, it's a conversation again, not a written defense. Here's a step almost nobody takes, and it's one of the most powerful. Once you've actually acted on feedback, go back to the person and tell them. Don't be silent and just hope that they notice the difference next time. Instead say, I took what you said on board, I changed how I approach this part, so let me know if that's heading in the right direction. This is something most people miss entirely. It shows the other person their feedback actually meant something. And it turns a one-off conversation into an ongoing conversation, the kind that builds real trust over time. Now, here's the bigger picture. People remember how you respond to feedback far more than they remember the feedback itself. So the person who gets defensive or shuts down or collapses teaches everyone around them one thing without saying it out loud. Don't bring anything difficult to this person, it's not worth it. Now the person who can hear something hard, sit with it, ask a good question and respond like an adult teaches everyone around them something completely different. You can bring things to this person, they'll handle it well. And here's what follows from that. The second person keeps getting honest feedback early, while it's still useful. The first person gets less and less of it until problems show up too late to fix quietly. That's the real cost, and it's invisible until it isn't. You don't need to enjoy feedback to handle it well. You just need a pause instead of a reflex, a question instead of a defense, and if you need it, a moment to think instead of a long email written in the heat of the moment. So next time someone raises something with you, try just one thing from this video. The pause, the clarifying question, or asking for time to think it through properly. Now, if this has been useful, hit the thumbs up and let me know in the comments. Out of the 3 reactions we talk about, defending, shutting down, or collapsing, which one is closest to your default? And if this series has helped you, tell me in the comments what you'd like covered next. I read every one. If you want the full framework for communicating with confidence in every direction, that's exactly what's inside my Ascend program, and the link is in the description. So subscribe if you want more of these. See you soon.